Fine.
Welcome
Sorry, I'm
to
late.
another
Hear me okay?
Street Hunters pub
Yeah, 1, 2,
meeting
3. Can you hear me
where
okay?
we can indeed, where we have this week as a special guest a street photographer from Los Angeles who, in a very short space of time, has produced a prolific amount of work and is very, very recognisable. Welcome to Rinzi Ruiz. How are we?
Everybody, I'm great. How are you? How's everybody?
Very
Hey,
good.
Rinzi,
Glad,
how are
glad
you?
you guys can join us.
Glad to have you here, mate.
Yes. As I was just saying, Rinzi, you know, I've done what may be called a little bit of research. It's been, I would say, a meteoric rise in street hunt or street photography terms. Whereabouts? Where did it all start from you? It's 2 years ago, I believe, 3 years ago.
Just about, yeah. Sort of in 2009, I was just kind of getting into photography, and then I found street about the end of 2009, and kind of started going out to shoot and get to know my cameras a little better around 2010. And it was around the time I also met Eric Kim, took his workshop. I believe that was 2011. And slowly from there, you know, I just kept shooting and practicing and, you know, posting to Flickr to see what people thought of it. And man, like you know, after a while, when I started producing some work that I was even happy with, you know, and getting noticed by some of my friends and others. I mean, it's been crazy. The amount of encouragement I received during that time to keep doing it. It was awesome. Yeah.
And it's a particular style, you know. It does clearly stand out. I do a lot of the social media, and absolutely clear. Is that based? Because I know you've done some graphic work before. Is that
Sure.
based on that kind of thing, or is it looking for the light? Where did the style come from?
Well, at first I didn't know what I was doing photographically, but yes, my background's, I think, in graphics, and I mean, I studied arts. You know, I drew and I painted as a kid, and you know, a lot of that had to deal with light and shadows. I think when I was just starting to use the camera, I didn't know how to produce that look. So it took some, you know, it took some experimentation and really getting to know my camera settings, and the fact that I realized how much light affected photographs. And in LA, we have an abundance of light. Not today so much; it's kind of overcast today, but I mean, every day I can go out and shoot and just find the most amazing light wherever I go. And so going out every day and practicing and looking at works of Ray K. Metzger, for example,
Right.
whose style, I mean, as soon as I opened that book, and I never had heard of him,
Yeah.
went into a bookstore, was just flipping through all kinds of books, and as soon as I looked at his work, I was like, yeah, this is the kind of work I want to produce.
Right.
I don't know what exactly happened. I just felt something inside, and I was like, that's what I want to produce. Things just like that. And so that's what I tried to go. I was like, well, what, you know, every picture that I look at, I'm like, okay, well, what camera kind of did he? Well, more so like what settings did they use?
Yeah.
And what, you know, where were they positioned? What focal length did I think they used? You know, like just the guessing game.
Yeah.
And so I went out and I was like, okay, well, it looked like everything was focused, so maybe f8 and above. It was really bright, so, you know, and then just going, putting myself in a position where when I looked at a scene, I could get that kind of effect or that kind of style.
So basically, lots of hard work and learning in this in 2 years. Excellent.
Yeah. People are like, well, how do you get to shoot so often? Well, in the beginning, I didn't, because I had a full-time job still, and so I learned through you know, just going online and going to different websites and learning, and then going out during my lunch hours, or when I had time on the weekends. And mostly it was just the weekends. I'd go out to like Chinatown, to Venice Beach, starting to get to know downtown LA area, and just exploring as I would, but also taking out my camera that I just bought to get to know it. And so that's how the practice started going. And then once I got laid off and I had all this time, I mean, I was shooting every day.
Yeah.
And just practicing. And then so I had a whole bunch of photos, and then, you know, of course, there's the editing process, which I had to really figure out and learn.
Oh, right.
And wow, man, that's probably the most difficult thing that I've experienced in the photography, is just picking out the ones that work and the ones that don't. I mean, yeah, it's the hardest thing.
and yes, and taking, because you've said in some other interviews, it's about letting them saturate, just waiting to see them, waiting to, and then taking a very, very conscientious look at them.
Yeah, yeah, I still make mistakes. I think, you know, I still sometimes really like a photo just because, you know, of the memories that I had.
Yeah.
Taking the shot, or the feeling that I had when I got it, and then I'll post it up, and then I'm like, oh, that was really bad, actually.
It seems irrational, in fairness, but I understand what you mean. But the other thing that also comes out from the pictures is, it's not only that say the style of the shot, but it's the people that you choose within them. They're completely, well, they're not completely from another planet, but they're very stylish, very smart. And I've written almost like actors on a stage, and that's another conscious decision.
Yes, especially during the editing process, because I could stay in, you know, a specific scene and pop off, you know, 10 shots, you know, maybe even if that, and then, you know, depending on the character of the person that comes up, that's the one that's going to stick out to me. But also, I am looking for that type of person who has sort of an agelessness about them.
Yes.
Because it works so well in black and white. You know what I mean? And it's really, you know, what I've come to learn throughout the last few years is it's not about any person being in the scene. It's waiting for the right person to be in the scene, and on top of that, it's not about just being the right person, but what is that person doing? So those are the things that I've, you know, come to learn over the last few years. Is, okay, well, I can sit here and shoot different people, but really, what's going to work for that shot is getting the right person doing the right thing that tells something about that scene, you know, about that person, or about that environment that they're in.
Yeah, because often enough it feels like street photography's snatch and go, just get in there, get out, you know, paracords or whatever. But your method seems to, you know, really taking your time to find the scene, find the light, find the people, and there is no rush to that.
No, I mean, sometimes I do wait, and then sometimes it just happens in front of me, and I don't have to wait. You know, as I'm walking along, it just happens in front of me. And then sometimes, yeah, I mean, I've learned also that I'm not as tired at the end of the day if I walk a little bit and then wait, and then, you know, observe, and really, right, what we're doing is observing something. And sometimes when I'm in downtown LA, there's so much things going on, right? There's all these people walking around cars, and so it's really about observing and kind of getting into my mind, okay, well, what's going on? How do I want to shoot this? Where do I want to position myself?
Yeah.
And so the time that I take to do that produces something, I think, a lot better than sometimes when it just happens. Because I got to, you know, those kind of things, you have to react quick. You can't frame it the way you want it to. So, yeah, I mean,
But it
Yeah,
goes.
at the end of the day, my feet aren't so tired.
But it also goes into the planning, because I heard somewhere that you will check Google Maps, work out what time sun's arising, and so there's pre-planning as well, which
Yeah.
even more extends this idea of looking after what kind of shot you want.
Yeah. I mean, when I traveled to, it was, 2012, I went to New York.
Yeah.
And, where I stayed was just in Jersey City. So in the mornings, I'd have to, plan to get to a certain part of Manhattan where I know, okay, well, the sun rises over here, so I gotta travel all the way east.
Yeah.
And so that I have the sun to my back, and then just travel west throughout the day, or north and south. So those are the things that I've become conscious of as I'm walking out. Just okay, well, where's the sun? Where is it going to be at this time of the day? And that changes throughout the year too. So it's just looking up, and going, oh, where's the sun at? Where's the light?
Absolutely. Well, it's I know that there's a lot of people here gagging to chat to you, so I will be quiet and hand it over to your good self, because I'm never quite sure in which order people face you. So just have a scroll through. There are people with questions, Rinzi.
Hi, everybody. Oh, I see an old coworker of mine on here. Hey, Michael. You can take it off mute, man.
Hi, Rinzi. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I just saw your link on Facebook, and I thought I'd click through on it. I thought it might be interesting. So yeah, just hanging out. I don't really have a specific question for you, but I'm just interested to see what was going on.
That's awesome. It's good to see you, man. It's been too long.
Thank you.
Right then, chaps. And in my list, Andrew Swigart is first over there. Have you something, Andy?
I was wondering, Rinzi, the professional work that you do, has that affected your street photography or vice versa? Like the weddings, the portraits, the event stuff?
I learned to use my camera while I was on the street. I think it helped a lot with getting familiar with the settings, with my reaction time. So I think it really helped a lot, going on the street and then taking that knowledge and when I shot my first wedding, I was nervous as heck. I had never done it before. A friend of mine said, hey, why don't you come and shoot my cousin's wedding along with the main photographer and another assistant. And so I went with him to shoot the bride, and the main photographer went and shot the groom. And I thought the guy, my friend who brought me to his cousin, he was going to be shooting and telling me, okay, well, do this and do that. Basically what he did was we got upstairs to where the bride was, and he was like, go. Start shooting. And I mean, the sweat just started right there. I'm shaking. But fortunately, the week before, I'd gone online. And I had to do my research, right? So I found there's a list of like 100 things that you should get at a wedding, and I looked at other people's wedding portfolios, things like that, just to get an idea of what type of shots they get. And so I went in there, started shooting all of the bride, the gown, the earring being put on, the mom helping, all that kind of stuff. And about a week and a half later, I turned in all my images to him, and I get a message back saying you should quit your day job.
Nice. Nice.
I was like, okay, cool. I think maybe I have something here. So I think it helps. I think any kind of thing that you could do to keep practicing the act of shooting and the act of observing and familiarizing yourself with the camera. I mean, what happens these days too is, every year we have new cameras, right?
Yeah, tell me about it.
So, and a lot of people just, they keep upgrading and upgrading and upgrading and upgrading. And that's great. Like, you know, the technology does get better, but very slightly every year. And it doesn't give anyone really a chance to get to know the camera that they have. And I think with some of my older cameras, for example, I started with a D90, but then when I got the X100, I mean, I'm still shooting that X100 till today. I mean, not as often, because you know, I've gotten a few other cameras, but the familiarity I have with that camera, where I can position myself and know that because I have that focal distance, that I'll get the shot and that I'll be framing it correctly, or just instinctively knowing, okay, well, here's the setting, and I got to change that real quick for this shot, and doing things more quickly like that with a specific camera. I think that's going to help regardless if you're doing street photography or if you're doing wedding or if you're doing portraits. The ability to react and know that tool that you're using, I think it's really important. You know? So I think that's where, you know, as far as street goes with you know, work stuff that I do, it really helps. You know, I mean, even after that, right? Because there's the processing. So I can practice all day with different street shots and you know, adjust saturation and levels and all kinds of stuff, and then take that into my professional work and still kind of maintain the same style that I have, you know, for both.
Like applying your style back and forth between the two. You mean?
Right.
Awesome.
I mean, because a lot of people, that's what they try to do, right? They have their signature style, and then that's what they get hired for to do, is that kind of style. And what I'm hoping is that, you know, I get to a point where my street stuff and my professional stuff can have like that signature style that then people go, okay, well, I want whatever photograph to look like that, and then hire me to do that, you know.
That's awesome. If I can add one other thing, one other question. I'm sorry, I don't want to hog up all the time, but I read on your blog that you're still trying to learn how to see, so to speak.
Yeah.
And do you think your style is still evolving?
Yes. You know, I think, you know, my last few years, what happened was, you know, there was a certain concept that I wanted to learn. So one was like, let's say, composition. So I just focused on that for a while. And then once I realized how light affected my images, then I stuck that in there and then just practiced that for a long time. So a lot of my shots for the last few years applied those things that I was trying to learn, right? Mm-hmm. So once I figured it out, it's like, okay, well, what's the next thing that I got to figure out and learn and focus on? You know, so is it moments? You know, so I want to go out and capture more moments, not just you know, pretty picture, right? Yeah. And then layering, right? There's layering in a lot of street photography pictures that I also want to be able to accomplish, and so it's going out and learning how to see in that way, right? And figure out the timing, figuring out the rhythm of the people, and so that when you do take it, everybody falls into place. Because that's the hardest part about that, right? Sure. Is the timing. Yeah. But you have to be able to see it first before you even take the shot. So a lot of it's just going around sometimes. Like yesterday, I went into Burbank, just downtown Burbank here, and they had a car show. And I went to go eat. I didn't realize there was a car show. And I didn't bring a camera, which is like one of the only times I didn't have a camera on me, right? I usually do have a camera with me all the time. And I could have used my iPhone, but I was just like, you know what, let me just take a minute while I'm walking around to just observe and kind of take pictures with my eyes and see, okay, well, I would have taken it this way, I would have taken it this way. So it's like always constantly just observing and seeing things and then going, okay, well, I would have taken it that way. And I think that's part of the practice too, is once you can see it in your mind, then it'll be able to translate into the camera too.
Right on.
Very much so.
Excellent.
Moving on just slightly, Brian, are you there? Do you have a question or a comment or something? Let's see. You're unmuted now. Wonderful.
Yeah, I'm here. Quick question about projects. When you're out shooting, do you have a project in mind, or do projects emerge from a body of work after a period of time, or both?
Right. When I started off, I didn't really have any projects in mind, so I didn't start off with that kind of mentality. And I've gotten two different sort of opinions from mentors of mine. And I guess the way that I've been doing it is just shooting without any preconceived kind of thoughts about what.
What happened?
We have someone's muted. Let's see. One moment, Rinzi. We seem to. There is a gentleman that's muted you. There we are.
Am I good? Okay.
We're good. Carry on. Sorry.
So there's two different ways to think about it, and the way that I was shooting, it was just not going out and not thinking of any kind of project or any kind of thing in mind. Maybe like a few things, like, okay, well, I want definitely people with that sort of look, right, that I'm looking for, but not specifically to put into a project. And the idea is that over time, like a lot of the projects that you see out there in books or whatever, it took them more than a year, sometimes 10 years, to finally put together that book, right?
Yeah.
So it's a long project. And to go out and just shoot specifically one thing, that's going to be hard for in just one day to capture everything that you wanted to capture. It does take time. So I'll go out and I'll shoot and I'll have a few things in mind, and then I'm hoping that over time, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I can look at a bunch of pictures and say, okay, well, this falls very well together, or these group of photographs fit very well together. I am trying, though, on the other side of it, to have something in mind, even to do in that span of time, right? Just to have some sort of idea, a theme, a thought, a feeling to convey, and to have a set of photographs to really keep in mind while I'm out shooting. I think it works better if it's like if it's something that you do over like a long period of time. I think for me it just works better that way. Because otherwise it's just going to like an event and shooting the event.
Yes, and fulfilling
that's
just
really kind of what it
a
is.
list.
Yeah.
Rather than actually thinking about the project through your own eyes, maybe.
Right. And in a lot of ways too, I feel like, okay, well, I want to really get the techniques and my way of seeing and doing all that stuff, getting really proficient at all that stuff before try to put something out there that then later on I'll be like, oh, why did I put it out there? It's not as good as what I could have done. But then there's the other side of that too, where people are like, well, just do it. Just put something out there. So I'm trying to gauge and trying to find a balance between.
But you did have yes, just have an exhibition. So
yes.
It's along the line, not necessarily project work, but the works have to come together somehow, though, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, that one. That was my first solo exhibition, and that was awesome. And the gallery, asked that it just be photographs from downtown LA. So that kind of, that helped me narrow it down to just those photos that I shot in downtown LA. But then with that, I was like, well, I have a lot of photos from downtown LA. So, trying to narrow it down to the, was it 25 photos for that show was, it's pretty hard.
Yeah.
And it spanned the last 3 years of photographs that I've taken. So, and various cameras. So.
We shall take a little step forward. And Darren, are we there?
Oh, I hope so. Can you
Yes,
hear it?
you are. Yes,
You're there.
I forgot to plug my mic in, see? What I really want to know is how you choose. I see most of your photos are black and white, but I know there's some colour ones. How do you choose between what you're going to process, black or white or colour?
Well, I started shooting black and white to learn black and white photography, to get really good at it. Excuse me. And so that's why most of my earlier work is in black and white. I thought also that it was easier to take black and white pictures, and I was wrong about that. Of course, there is things about black and white that's just as difficult as in color, but at the time also I think it enveloped the type of mood and emotions that I was feeling at the time. So I think black and white was just for me the right thing to do, or it just made sense for me to do, because it was congruent with everything else that I was going through at the time. But as far as like choosing, at that point I just chose to make everything black and white. Now, in choosing color, for me, it just really has to make sense. And I think what I've noticed with a lot of the color stuff that I'm posting recently is that there's a reason why I picked that, and it's because of the color that's in there. Whether and it's something that I noticed as I was shooting it. If I shot it because of the color, well, then I'm going to leave it in color. If I shot it more for the light, then that's where black and white works really well. So for me, it's just if it makes sense to leave it in color, and there's no other distracting colors or other distracting parts of the photograph, then I'll leave it in color. Like a red dress, right? Like a lady in a red dress walking around. That makes sense to me to leave it in red because that's what sticks out. And I find too that I've stuck with, the primary ones. The red, green, blue, yellows. Those are the ones that I seem to leave in color for some reason.
So would you say you've sort of taught yourself to shoot color?
Yeah. I've had to sort of change my way of seeing, to go out and go, okay, well, that makes sense in color, and I'm going to keep it in color. Because it's so hard. I mean, I think with a lot of people that shot film, you had your film, and it came out looking that specific way, right? With digital, with color, you just have billions, like literally billions of options of how to process it. And you really have to get your white balance correct, and I mean, there's all this stuff that comes with color that, yeah, with black and white it's kind of simpler. You just literally just flip it to black and white, and you don't have to deal with any of the color. You don't have to deal with it. Like if the face turned a little bit more orange or blue, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it kind of matters, but not so much. But I found it a lot easier. But now it's like, okay, well, you have to learn. You have to get over that challenge or that that restriction of like figuring out what style of color you're going to do it in. There's cross process. There's changing, adding green to the shadows, adding magenta to the to the high. There's all these things that you can do to color to make it your own style, and it's really just trying to figure out what that is for me as well. What am I going to stick with? Just the natural. Okay, that's how I saw it, and those are the colors that were in the scene. Or am I going to make it a little fancier and do something to it, and make it look more. Well, for example, the Visco presets. Right? A lot of people use the Visco presets to make it look like a certain film type. Now, am I going to take that style and use that in my color? Probably not. Not at this point, because I was starting to do it more, just as I saw it or as I capture it.
Great.
So, I mean, those are the things that went in my mind as I was deciding and learning and figuring out, okay, this color thing is getting a little more complicated. What am I going to do? How am I going to do it?
Okay.
Thanks,
Can I
Darren.
ask one question?
Sure.
Sure.
The public perception of your work, do you get better feedback from a colour photo or a black and white photo?
Wow. I don't know yet. I think for the most part, the black and whites, because I think my black and whites have a little bit more style. They're a little more stylized than my color. I still use the same technique per se. I'm still focusing on light and the specific people. So really, I think if you take a lot of my color work and just literally put it black and white, I don't really see sometimes there's a difference between the two. But I did, as soon as I started posting my color work, I did get some comments saying that I should keep shooting color, or I should stick to shooting color. I don't want to restrict myself to one or the other. So I'm just glad people are still looking at my work, because you know how things are with social media.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Martin, are you still in there?
Yeah, I'm still in there.
Martin.
I'd like to ask about a few months ago or half a year ago, you did a series on Occupy.
Yes.
Yes. Would you mind talking about that a bit? Because I felt this series was very different from everything else you have done.
Yeah, that's true. I think because it was more of a documentary, and it happened at a time when I was kind of just learning and trying to figure out what and how I wanted to shoot. Because all that Occupy stuff happened, when I first started, and that was over probably about a few months. Over that year, or actually over almost 2 years of the Occupy movement happening in downtown LA, and it took me a long time actually to edit that set, and didn't really know how is it gonna work out, how are all these images gonna be put together, and are they gonna look good together? What am I trying to say? Actually, haven't looked at it in a while. But it's very different. I don't know. I think, mostly it's because I was just learning at the time and trying to figuring out what I wanted to do. Yeah, put it up real quick here. Oh, you know what, too? I was shooting with a lot of those too, I was still shooting with an 85mm. I think maybe that's, I don't know.
We've sent you back in time.
Sorry, I can't ask you. I know. I'm like, whoa.
But all previous work does seem to inform the future, and since that, it seems to have cleared up a lot. Your work, it really is. I keep on wanting to say American Minimalists, and have you ever heard of Ellsworth Kelly? does shapes and things, and your work often reminds me of that. And it must have just travelled an awful long way since the Occupy stuff. Exhilarating, though.
Yeah. I mean, from that point, I mean, oh, you know what happened during that time period too was shooting for a project for a think tank gallery out here in Los Angeles, and it was one of those things where you had to submit photos, and then they would pick out participants in the project, and I was surprised to be chosen, and that helped too with some of this stuff, because that's when I was out shooting for that project, the whole Occupy thing happened, and so that kind of also encouraged me to keep, like, the fact that they chose me to be part of that project encouraged me to keep shooting, and I kept shooting more and more. And you know what I keep thinking about right now, just looking at these photos, is that the second half of the photos happened just when I got laid off of work. Specifically that day, I got laid off, and then I went down to downtown LA and took those pictures. And somebody even said, "Hey, we just saw you on TV. why aren't you at work?" And then I had to post up on Facebook that I got laid off. And they're like, "Well, you're off doing what you want to do, so that's great." And that's kind of what I thought of. I was like, "Well, now I got time to go shoot, and let's go shoot." So yeah, it's been a great experience the last few years, let me say. Yeah.
Great.
A blessing in disguise.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Michael, I can see you're still muted down there. Does that mean that a beautiful question hasn't risen to mind? You can just.
I'm sorry. No, I don't really have any questions. I mean, just to comment on it all. I really enjoy seeing Rinzi's stuff pop up on my Facebook feed. I'm always really interested to see those photos.
Yeah.
I honestly, I especially like the color photos that I've seen come through recently. I thought they were really cool. I guess the story specifically is I remember we were at a bar one night and Rinzi took a photo of me smoking at the front of that bar, and it ended up on the LA Times website. Yeah, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool and interesting. I still have that photo somewhere. That's a nice memory. But I really enjoy the photos that come up. Like I say, I hope to make it out to one of your shows soon. And yeah, I specifically have started to enjoy the color stuff that you've been putting up.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, just Michael and I used to work together at Technicolor, and we actually also were able to spend some time in Bangalore, India together a few years ago.
That's right.
So
Yeah,
that was cool.
Did you manage to take any photos that you've shared with the
I lost all those. All the ones that I took in India, they were on a hard drive that crashed, so I haven't been able to retrieve them yet.
Ouchie.
Yeah. And you know what's funny is during that time I was shooting, and man, the HDR thing was pretty big still. I guess it still is now, but I was trying it, so a lot of that work, a lot of the stuff that I did shoot in India, I was processing it in that way. So there's a part of me that's like, well, I'm glad I don't have a lot of that stuff out, because I would have had to go back and just redo the whole the whole thing. Because I don't want to. I don't like.
You would have suffered HDR shame at some point.
There's nothing wrong with HDR when it's done right.
Yeah.
It's just there's a lot of it that's kind of overdone out there.
Right.
Just,
Yeah.
Moving on, we have Mike.
Mike Beecham.
Mike Beecham. Sorry, Lovely. Yeah, Mike Beach.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So I guess the technical stuff. If you're around the technical stuff long enough, you can get it down. I guess. What I want to know is, I've looked at a lot of your body of work, and most of it's really, really impressive. But are there any photos that you regret taking, and why?
Wow.
Leave that one with you, Rinzi.
That's a deep, very deep question. I mean, I'd say the ones that, when I look at it, it really brings me down. Right? I mean, there's some things out there when when I first started, I just shot everything. Right? I didn't really stop myself from shooting anything. It was whatever I saw, I took pictures of. And spending time in downtown LA, there's a lot of homeless people there. There's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of just things that society's left, right? It's just not a good thing. So, when I look back at some of those photos that I took, of homeless people, luckily I never really posted a lot of them, just the ones that made sense and that featured them in a different light. But, just shooting them laying on the floor, or, just in their struggle, right? It's when I look back, and it just makes me sad. It doesn't make me feel good at all.
No, sure.
So probably. Sorry.
No, carry on, sorry.
Yes. So for those kind of photos, when I'm going back through and editing, like why did I take those shots? I mean, yes, I felt something at the time, but you got to think about too. I had to think about, okay, when I'm presenting my photos, what does that say about me? What does that say about the person? And I didn't like what some of those photos were saying and what it was making me feel inside.
Sure. So
those are the ones that I would say I wouldn't say regret, but I just I don't do it nowadays, basically.
So have you put boundaries in place now? Are there just no-go areas for you when you're out shooting? Are there things that you simply won't shoot, or is your process fairly loose? I might shoot that, but it would have to depend on this, and this, or
right.
I will never shoot again.
Yeah, there's always a it depends with everything. But going around downtown LA, the street vendors, they've been shot so many times. Everybody's taking pictures of them. So what would my picture add to that is what I think. Mm-hmm. Now, if I'd done it in a very interesting way, where something was going on that made it different from everybody else's, sure. Street performers, never again. Unless, right, those certain things, again, homeless. I mean, if it doesn't make sense, if there's something there that is a little more than what's normal, what everybody else has shot. I mean, you can go to Flickr and literally find, the same thing over and over again, right? Like we've seen that in our feeds. Somebody just walking. I mean, if you're going to do that, do it in a different way, right? That's what I'm thinking in my head. How am I going to do it in a more interesting way, in a more aesthetically pleasing way, where it puts a lot of the things that I've learned and puts it together, right? Combines all the things that I've learned and puts it together. So, I mean, yes, I won't necessarily focus on them when I'm walking around. I also won't do events anymore. Like for example, there's parades that happen in downtown LA, or all over Los Angeles area. Events and parades and things like that. And I'd rather not go to those things because they all end up looking like the same pictures that everybody else takes.
Yeah.
So the key thing for me is just really, okay, well, if I am going to shoot any of those things, not to say I'm not going to shoot them, but if I do, then it has to, fall under, those certain things that I keep in mind. It has to be a little bit different, it has to combine things that I learned, and as much as possible, try to make it as unique as possible.
Sure. Thanks, Rinzi. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Superb. Paul.
Hi. How are we doing?
Very good.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah. Hi, Rinzi. Well, thanks for sparing the time. Basically, this is fantastic. I host a show live and uncut. If it's okay, I'd like to ask 3 questions. One,
sure.
Could you just tell us about the gear that you use in your street photography?
Okay. Currently, I'm shooting with, in the bag, 2 different cameras. I have the Fujifilm X-T1, and with that, I'm using the 23mm 1.4. For portraits, I'm using the 56 1.2, which is really, really nice lens, and it's a lot lighter than the 85mm I have for my Nikon. And I have Nikon gear, for some of the more work-related stuff that I do that need, full frame and it's just reliable. These Nikon gear. So, but as far as for street, the Fujifilm X-T1 and the Samsung NX30, and on that I have the 30mm most of the time, 30mm f2, which is a really nice lens actually. It's super light. You can't, like, when I put it on, I don't even feel it. That's how light that camera is.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 right now that I'm shooting with. But occasionally I'll mix it up. I have the X Pro 1, I have the X100. I like the look of the Fujis, right? And the IQ is really, really nice. But right now I'm just trying to get familiar with the cameras. So whatever cameras I have, I'll just take that out and get as familiar with it as I can.
I think that's a very important point you've made so far, and in the answers you've given and earlier on, is how you've actually taken the time to learn about your camera, rather than falling into the trap like a lot of people do, say, I need a better camera to make better photographs.
Right. There's no perfect camera out there.
Exactly right. You need to learn about it. Could you just tell us a little about your process when you've done your photography? What's your basic workflow? Just basic workflow that you do for your processing.
For street stuff.
Yeah,
primarily?
just for the street. Okay. Yeah.
After a day of shooting, depending on how many pictures I took, I might not even download those photos or upload them to my computer that day. Yeah. So when I get a chance, I'll put them in, and as they're coming into Lightroom, I can kind of give a first look at them, kind of like the contact sheet in thumbnail mode, and from there I can see compositionally, like, okay, well, that one came out pretty good, and that one's all right. The light worked out there, my timing worked out well right there, and I might flag them at that point, and then I'll just move on for a while, and then maybe a couple weeks later or a couple days later, I'll go in and I'll go, okay, well, I want to start working on them and deciding whether or not I keep them in black and white, leave it in color. So certain things that I've decided on in the last kind of few months was, okay, well, shooting in Venice Beach, it just makes more sense to leave those in color. It's a very colorful place, it's the beach. So I chose to leave those in color. For a lot of the downtown LA ones, it's just going through and going, okay, well, what do I want to do with this one? I'll get rid of the ones that that are horrible. Just because I don't want to have those in my hard drive. I already have to go out and get a new hard drive because I'm running out of space already. So it's going through and making sure at least like getting rid of the ones that are complete. Like I don't even want to remember ever taking those shots. Or some of them, if I'll do a test shot on my hand to make sure I got the right exposure. So I mean, obviously that gets deleted right away.
Yeah, you dump that straight away. It's interesting that you don't actually then get back home, process, start the work straight away. You leave your images on the hard drive for about 2 or 3 days, and then you revisit them to have a good view.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of them.
That's interesting.
Some of them I won't see again for like a year.
Yeah.
There's stuff that I'm posting now that I shot in 2013. It's just, sometimes you'll be processing at night or in the afternoon, and you've changed the blacks a little bit, the shadows, and then 3 days later you look at it again, you're like, why is it so dark? Or why did I process that so light? Like what was I seeing at the time? So that's why I give time, even after I've processed it and I've gotten to a certain look, I won't post it right away. I'll still give myself a few days to really go, okay, well, yeah, that looks about right.
Yeah, you finalised on it after that time, yeah. That's really interesting you say that. Interesting. I must try that myself, actually. One final question to ask you, because obviously when you started off, you were talking about that you studied other photographers, one particular photographer in particular. But what I wanted to ask you, have you found that other photographers' style has interfered with your style that you're trying to create? To the point, dare I say, and I do use this tentatively, of fearing that you may copy the style of a photographer that you've actually studied.
Sure. I mean, I think when you're first learning photography, it is about copying, right? I mean, not necessarily copying, but you're trying to figure out a specific technique, a certain style. And, back in the day when you're a painter, you would get an apprentice, and that apprentice would paint exactly how you paint to get that specific style or learn the process of. But then slowly those same apprentices become masters themselves, right? And their work looks nothing like, there's similarities, but it's very different from their master's work. They've just taken, that knowledge, that way of doing things, and made it their own. So I think for me that was very key to not exactly copying somebody's style, but learning something from it, taking what I feel like I can make my own and making it my own.
Yeah.
I think that's the important part about the learning process. Anything creative is just, you're going to have to learn the basics, the ABCs of how to do it. And a lot of it will be copying somebody who's done it before. It's modeling. That's how that works. You model after somebody else, and then you kind of do it yourself. And
I think
the key is to make it your own.
I think that's a better word to use there, modeling rather than copying. I think that's a far better word to use rather than the one I made. Thanks for your answers. That's really great. Thank you. I must remember that. Visit my images a few days later and not do them straight away.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. No, thanks, Rinzi. Thanks.
And we have Good Suspiros.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Rinzi.
Thanks for contacting me.
Yeah, man. How are you?
I'm great.
Awesome. Well, I just have one question. I just wanted to ask you, how hard was it when you decided to be a photographer as a full-time job? I mean, what was it like? And do you have any advice you can give any of our viewers that want to do the same thing?
Well, it was very difficult. I mean, but it also wasn't 100% by choice. I mean, I did get laid off of the full-time job that I had, and then it was like, okay, well, what do? I do have some money saved up to learn right now and focus on learning my camera, learning the world of photography. It's so big. And then, okay, so what do I get into? So that was another question. Do I stick with weddings? Do I stick with portraits? Do I do, you know, fashion, commercial, editorial? I mean, what is it? And then so I had to talk to a lot of friends, and throughout, the good thing about the street photography community that I've come to learn is, you know, a lot of people, you know, don't just do street photography, right? They do other things. They do weddings. They do commercial work. And so it was starting to talk to them, right? And some of them also even, you know, were nice enough to take me along on their gigs as an assistant, or just as a just to watch them do what they do, which is great. Because in deciding it, you don't really know, like, okay, well, those are the pictures. I want to create that, but what's it really like? What's the process of getting there? What is the process of managing that and producing that? Because that's what you end up becoming as a photographer in certain fields. Is you become the producer, you become the manager. You gotta set everything into place. There's a lot less photography and more of the planning and the business side of things, right? And so it was good that I had so many different friends that did different types of photography, so I could get an insight of, okay, well, what does their world look like, and how did they get into it, and then seeing if I fit into that, if that's something that I want to do. I think a lot of people, when they think about, oh, I want to get into photography, I mean, they think of one thing, but then, you know, they got to think about, okay, well, how am I going to get into that? How am I going to break into that field? Because street photography is very different. You just go out and you just shoot, right? To set up a fashion thing, I mean, there's so many things involved, so many other people involved, right? You got to talk to a creative director, or you know, the hairstylist, the makeup artist. You know, there's a lot of things involved in that. So if that's something that, you know, if a person wants to get into that, I mean, you got to learn everything about that field. I mean, not only just the camera stuff, just even who's who in that field, right? Like, I had a friend of mine gave me a very good tip and advice on this. It's like, if you're going to get into commercial, if you're going to get into fashion, for example, well, what brands do you know of? What designers do you know of?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. If you're already into that already, that helps. But if you don't know anything about that field, or anything about who, you know, who Versace is, like,
a whole other world,
you're not going to know. Sorry?
It's a whole other world, yeah.
It's a whole other world, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, for weddings, you know, there's a lot to also figure out in wedding stuff. You know? So it really helps if you do want to get into a certain field to, you know, have a friend or reach out to somebody who does it really well, and, you know, ask if they, you could help out, or you know, just watch while they do it, so you get an idea of their world, right? I mean, I think that's missed. I think that's missed in everything these days. The whole idea of apprenticeship. In every industry, you know, I think there's a few out there that probably still does that, but, you know, it's very hard for somebody to really know what they want to do, because you can have that idea, you want to do something, you have the imagination for it, but then it's very different when they actually start doing that, and they're just like miserable, like, oh God, why did I spend 20 years trying to be a doctor? I don't even like the sight of blood. You know what I mean? Like, that's what happens. They don't let them touch a patient until, you know, way further down. I mean, I know nothing about that industry or what it takes to be a doctor. So I'm just going off of, like, movies that I've seen. But yeah, I mean that whole idea of apprenticeship and having somebody who is a master at something, or just somebody who does something very well, teaching the student.
Do you think, because we do quite a lot of it on the social media anyway,
Sure.
and do you think it's the contact and the consistency of the apprenticeship idea, rather than just scrolling through social media and go, I'm learning this, I'm learning this?
Right. Well, you know, you can learn a lot on the computer, but then, you know, if you don't go out and practice it, if you don't go out and actually do whatever it is that you want to get better at, you're not going to get better at it at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. And, you know, with as far as, you know, career-wise, I mean, I would say I'm happier now than I was doing the photography thing, you know, and I think success will come, you know, as far as monetary success will come, you know, the harder I work and the more I can figure out what my style is and reach out to more people.
Indeed, indeed.
So, Rinzi, now you do portrait work and wedding work and street photography, correct?
Yes.
Did you try anything else before you settled in these types of photography? For example, did you try sports photography or, I don't know, event? Yeah?
Yeah, you know, I've done not a lot of sports photography, but I did have a friend who shot at a softball tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a lot of kids playing sports all day, and that wasn't something I was very interested in. You know, after that experience, I was like, not as fun. You know, for me personally, just it wasn't as fun. You know, I recently shot a polo practice, and also was like, yeah, I'm not feeling it. You know, it's just it wasn't something I really got into. Studio work, you know, I've practiced that. I've shot a few with some friends as well, and I know at some point I'm going to have to do that. But being indoors is just different for me than being out and using, you know, the available light. You know, I for some reason there's something to available light that I just gravitate towards, rather than using a studio and using studio lights.
Yeah.
I mean, it's necessary sometimes, you have to, but I just feel like there's some kind of life, more life in the picture when I'm doing something with available light. I don't know what it is. It's just a feeling that I have, right? It's not as sterilized, I think is the word that I'm thinking of, right? Studio stuff compared to people who shoot primarily available light. For me, there's just a feeling to it that I gravitate towards.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, well, we're veering towards our hour slot, but there was actually just a question I wanted to ask.
Sure.
There was I was reading through social media the other day, as I do, and on the bottom of a competition, some well-known photographer was berating really what was the entry and saying street photography is dead, because it's cliched and it's now too popular to be good. Is it something that you feel?
Well, I think for some people, I think what's going on right now is, you know, it got really big, I think, when I got started, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are getting into it. A lot of people were getting into it at that time. And there were people before that were into it. And those people, when all these people start getting into it, they're like, oh, well, it's dead, right? We don't want to do it anymore. And then now these people are, you know, a few years later, and all of a sudden a whole new wave of people are getting interested in it, and they're going, well, you know, again, it's dead because, you know, all these new people are getting into it. So I think that's just gonna happen with anything.
Yeah.
But also, I think a lot of people who get into it, I think, you know, I don't feel like I'm very different from any other person out there. So I think if they got into it as well, they're gonna naturally try other types of photography and maybe get into that more than shooting street.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I think shooting street and getting really good at it takes, you know, it takes some things. It takes not really being afraid of, you know, being yelled at sometimes. It takes just being out there on the street and shooting and practicing, and not a lot of people have, you know, the luxury of spending a lot of time on the street and getting really good at it. So, I mean, you know, that's kind of what I think where it's at right now. I mean, even for me, I spend a little bit less time on the street now, and I'm trying to focus on, you know, taking portraits and doing the other kind of photography that I want to do. So, is it dead? No. I think there will always be people out there shooting street photography. Or shooting out on the streets, right? And it all depends on what your definition of street photography is.
We've stayed away from trying to answer that question.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to argue. You know, I'm not. It is what it is to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, some people are really strict on that. You know, just be happy. Just whatever you're doing. You know, if it makes you happy going out and shooting. You know, I'm not going to take that away from you.
Right.
They made me happy, right? So.
If I could add on top of that real quick, Rinzi, I think it's not so much a question as it is a comment. When I was reading about the Zen, the happiness, the one thing that really struck a chord with me was saying, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks, when you said, if you go out and you feel like a creep, you know, it's different as if you approach it with a positive attitude, because Absolutely. When somebody starts in street photography, I think it's kind of natural to feel like a creep, you know. But that it's simple and it's brilliant, man, and thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, it really is just a change of mind. That really helped me, you know what I mean, as far as my process and my progress. I mean, why go out and be nervous and be intimidated and be, you know, in constant fear of something happening wrong? I mean, that's not what I got into it for. I wanted to go out and relax and have fun and take pictures along the way. So those things that didn't benefit me at all, I didn't want to focus on. So I just focused on the things that benefited me, which is, okay, if I just walk along and breathe and take pictures, that's what I enjoy, and I want to focus on that. And if somebody doesn't like what I'm doing, that's not my problem, that's their problem. And I just keep moving forward. But it's also how I react to those things, right? I can react in a negative way, I can react in a positive way. And I just choose to react in a more positive way with those things. Because if it's not fun, why do it? It's not fun.
Right.
Yeah. Very much so. Rinzi, before I slide away into absolute darkness here,
yeah, where are you going?
We'll just pull on the live broadcast and maybe continue in a moment.
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed for your time. It has been a real pleasure to have you along.
Thank you very much.
Guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Cheers.